Thank you. Welcome to be here. We have a full crowd, and so we're going to try to get this moving along. It is my pleasure to welcome and introduce Jenks and Carl Phelps to our presentation today on the art of bonsai. So this will be a very interesting event for, I think, everyone. I'd like to just give a quick intro about them and their nursery, because the Middlebury Garden Club will be taking a shopping tour later in June. So hopefully you can join and see this incredible nursery. It has a lot of wonderful plants. So are co-owners of Miller Hill Farm, and they are just about 15 minutes south of here on Route 73. So they're not very far away, and it's easy to get to. Their nursery has been in operation for 25 years under their leadership, starting as wholesale growers, but now they've transitioned to retail and wholesale. So they have received the award from the Vermont Nursery and Landscape Association for environmental and sustainable practices. This is a biggie. Not too many nurseries can boast that. Their distinct nursery has become a destination for gardeners and everyone who loves plants near and far. Carl started in horticulture at a very young age. He grew up on his father's tree farm and tree nursery, and he always had a pair of pruning cutters on his belt. So he worked there for many years. He also worked in a friend's dairy farm. After college, he oversaw 1,200 acres of Hopkins forest at Williams College, and he started his first commercial nursery in Williamstown in Massachusetts before relocating to Vermont in Sudbury. And here in Vermont, he has served on and chaired at the Brandon Free Public Library Board for 18 years and laying the groundwork for the major renovation that is still being undergone today. Nan, who has been a field biologist, environmental educator, and academic administrator, she's affiliated with several institutions, including Middlebury College. She has received numerous awards, including honorary degree from Middlebury, and she has stepped away from higher education in order to focus on their nursery and the conservation and ecosystem restoration of their 180-acre farm. So here in Vermont, she serves on the board of the Shelburne Farms. So without further ado, I would like to let them continue. Thank you.
Thanks, Emily. Hello, I'm Nan. We were asked to say a few words about the nursery, so I was enlisted for this part of the presentation. As you mentioned, we've been at the farm for about almost 3 decades now and loving every minute of it. And the farm was established in the late 1790s by Timothy Miller. And the hay barn and the main house in the front both date back to 1798. And however, I do want to acknowledge that our farm and vast areas of Vermont are lands of the Abenaki people who inhabited it long before the colonials arrived. Today we grow plants and we sell plants that we source from Vermont growers and friends of ours, and we are able to provide to our customers annuals, perennials, shrubs, berry bushes, fruit trees, ornamental trees and shrubs, and have long been growers of native plants, which we're excited to see how many people are interested in today. The native plant business has really grown for us to go from restoration projects to homeowners, which is, it's fun to have a business like ours to be able to watch horticulture evolve. And to see new faces and to see what people are doing in the business now, or the people that it's attracting. People come for native plants and edibles to combine together. It's just, anyways, it's fascinating for us. Last year we introduced a whole array of pollinator plants for another audience of customers, and because that means a lot to us. And we also sell planters, statuary, farmhouse antiques in the store. The store will be open this year. So after a long hiatus, But we are not like every other nursery, and if you have visited us, and I hope you will, our visitors and customers have a unique experience. They stroll around the farmstead where the plants are integrated into old outbuildings that are repurposed for current day use. And whether it's the beautiful view of the Green Mountains or the new metal sculpture that Stu Johnson in Cornwall just made for us, or the arrangement of colors and plants in a campanula planter, or this year the most photographed part of the farm was a beautiful old small wagon cart that I had a price tag on for 4 years, and finally just put it out, and Tessa Rena, who's our manager and worked with us for years, just started to fill it with hostas and variegated hostas and astilbe and ostrich fern, and that cart was photographed more than anything else, that arrangement. Move it from there, empty, move it to there, and embellish it with plants, and everyone wanted to buy it. If you know Ellen from Blue Moon, she said, I need to have this cart, and I said, Ellen, that cart has been over there for sale for 4 years. It's no longer for sale. You can take a picture of it if you want. But return customers and new customers tell us that they find themselves calmed and inspired at Miller Hill, which is really important for us because we are neither calm most of the time. Another goal for us is to have plants be accessible to all gardeners and new and seasoned at reasonable prices. And also to have the plants not just be sold, but to go home with somebody and for that new owner to be successful and joy-filled. And so a lot of time is spent with customer questions, which is really important, especially with the advice that Carl can provide. We're also committed to community and providing services like this today and others, numerous programs and collaborations throughout the year. And additional education is a core value of ours. And we host workshops and walks and talks all throughout the season, including 3 very popular bird walks, Carol and Jackson, that will start in May. And also we host classes from Castleton, UVM, Sudbury College, and others. We will be offering a bonsai workshop, hands-on workshop this summer, so check our website for that to come up. Also, every day we strive to implement environmentally sound practices. As Emily so graciously mentioned, is not a practice of a lot of nurseries, and it's becoming more so, and we're happy to see that. Our environmental mission extends to over 100 acres of our land, which is now in conservation easement, and we engage in partnerships with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Vermont Fish and Wildlife, Vermont Audubon, the Center for Ecosystem Studies, to both protect the land and restore the wetlands and reestablish habitat, to plant trees for carbon sequestration. We manage our hayfields for bobolinks and other grassland nesting birds, and our upland pastures for the golden ring warblers, and also for pollinators. We installed a nesting osprey pole in conjunction with Vermont Fish and Wildlife and Green Mountain Power, and that nesting site has been active for 4 years, producing young that migrate every August. These are actions that not only we can undertake, but every property owner and gardener can engage in at a different scale and have an impact. Today we're here to talk about the ancient art of bonsai. In Western cultures, it may be familiar to you that happiness is oftentimes defined as success in terms of achievement, satisfaction, and purpose. This would be the arc of my career. But in many Asian cultures, on the other hand, the definition of happiness has long been embedded in a sense of calm and contentment. The latter describes Carl and his journey in working with bonsai plants. And so I turn the mic literally over to Carl.
So this first photograph is actually a few years old now, and it just has that, probably not that supposed to be, is it? It has that look, where you've got this nice willow behind, you've got the lantern, and this little guy. And one of the reasons I put this up, you know what, I've got one of these fancy pointers. This is what they used to use before. Laser pointer things. So this little guy is a juniper. So about 30 years ago, a friend of mine gave me this book. Miniatures and Bonsai. It's like a, time life. Yeah, it is time life. Right? So he gave me that, and I thought, I really want to do that. And so I really thought about it, and 20 years later, I finally decided, well, maybe I better really get serious about this. So I'd say 8 to 10 years ago, this plant was removed from the nursery. It was this tall. And I didn't know what I wanted to do with it, but I sure wanted it to be a bonsai. So so what I did was I concentrated, and this is an important thing, and I'll probably ramble on about this a lot, but I'll remind myself and you that when you're growing these plants, the more green, the more growth. So if you want to get some girth on the bottom of the tree, you've got to have something to feed it on top. So I left everything up here for a few years. And then finally, it was all coming out of right here. This was the first branch. Then this first branch, I kind of worked into a set now of 3. So they started working out. And they were actually branching out more. As I said, 3 years ago or 4 years ago when this was taken, now this plant's kind of spread out quite a bit. And then I cut that piece right off. So off it went, but it was feeding the plant all those years. And it didn't take that long, and I felt it also looked nice when it was there. So it served 2 purposes. It had an aesthetic value while it was there. It was feeding the girth of the trunk, and then when I wanted it to come off, it came off. Now I've learned since some tricks about saving those by air layering. Is anybody familiar with air layering? So it does work. With junipers, it works pretty good. So I could have, if I had the patience, to air layer that piece and then remove it after, I think it takes like 6 to 14 weeks, depending on what kind of plant it is. And it will have roots in it, and then you cut that off and you can plant that. You'll see all this if you decide to journey further into this. So anyhow, this was the first one that kind of got me going, and these are all starts behind it. And so where should we go from this side? I know, there's a little button over here. There it is. Okay. So one thing to keep in mind is that in bonsai your work is never done. And does anybody know who Peter Chan is? No. So Peter Chan owns Heron's Bonsai. He's like 84 now. Heron Bonsai is right outside of London. And he has quite an operation there, and he's very well known now as a person who brought the mystique of bonsai to the public. And he just says, have fun. You don't have to be a master to get started. Somebody's got to start somewhere. So. And he said, in one of his talks, he said, bonsai is a currently evolving work of art, which is very true. So you're always working, and there's your tool. How many people have a pair of Phelps? So it's like excellent tool. And the nice thing about the Phelps is it has a little notch on it. When you're working with these, it cuts wire. So not with the blade though, but there's a little wire cutter notch. So it's a very nice tool to work with. We'll show other tools in a bit. That's the right button. Okay. So I'm just going to touch on the history of this. If you get interested, before you get into it, it's nice to know a little bit about where the origins of this came from. Sorry. Where was I? Okay, so with the origins, obviously it's so long ago, hard to pin down, but around 2,000 years ago, people were making miniature landscapes in pots or even big trays called panjing. And that was something they did in China, and had these miniature landscapes can get very complicated, and they're very interesting. And then around 1,000 years ago in Japan, they began concentrating on one element, which was the tree. And so they called it bonsai, which is planted in pot, or there are a couple other ways of saying it, maybe plant in pot, but we're going to go with planted in pot today because I put it up there. And so anyhow, I would encourage you to look into it a little bit more. And also things like that lantern. That lantern actually has some, it has a history, and there's a reason why people have them. Maybe we have them as decoration, but it's really, to me, important to understand what their origin is and what they mean to people. So it's just something that would be nice to look into. Our soil mixes. So we start off with the crazy one. It's been said that if you ask 100 different experts what their favorite soil mix is, you'll get 100 different answers. And working with these plants, we find out that's very true. And it also depends on what stage is the plant at. Is that it's growing early stage, or later when you're trying to actually slow that growth down. So what we use right now, and this is a nursery operation, so we're actually growing plants. So what we use for the bonsai is, this is peat moss. Everybody knows that one. This is what we thought was the answer to peat moss. It's a cocoa coir. And this is just compost. And they provide, the compost provides some nutrients, and you get water retention out of both of these. However, this core drains much better. First of all, it takes in water much better, and then drains much better than peat. Have you ever tried to wet peat down when it's really dry? I learned from this gardener when I was much younger. She said, you put a hose in it, turn it on, you just leave it there, and you fill up the bag, and leave it there overnight. And then in the morning, it's finally got some soaked in. So lava rock, and that's for drainage and airspace, and it also, it gives the roots space, so that, think about clay, and just plants don't have any room to grow in that, so this keeps the soil open. These also do they have a little water retention because they're full of tiny little holes. And some people actually take a hammer to bricks, break them all up, and use them instead. It's a lot cheaper. You really shouldn't remove them from your neighbor's wall. But, the only thing I worry about with the bricks is, are they bringing any chemicals into the mix? So maybe if I was going to do that, I'd break it up and then soak it in water for a long time. The sand and grit we put in, we try to get a coarse sand. Now this one I brought along happens to be something we use. It's a little fine for me. Again, we don't want things packing in. So the sand and the grit are both for drainage and to keep some airspace in. And the sand does a funny thing. When you add sand into your mix, it tends to hold water down. It won't come up past the sand, so it's actually a bit of a mulch, sort of. So, and this is just plain old mulch. And I use quite a bit of this in our mix. It keeps the soil fluffy, and again, allows the roots to really move through. The other things you might want to think about is if you're using these things, none of them are natural except the compost. You don't have any microorganisms in there, and really microorganisms are very important, fungi and such, for the plants to feed. So you can get little packets and sprinkle it into your soil mix, and it'll seed it down with some microorganisms. And they really don't grow up at night and come out in the house and start stomping around or anything. But I've seen it on the movies. So yeah, I probably got to keep moving along, right? Here's another one. Tools. So some basic tools. This is probably the first actual bonsai tool I purchased. And these were all regular steel before. There's a lot of stainless steel out there now. So this is a concave cutter. They come in different sizes. We have them for teeny little work. But when you work with a concave cutter, you can actually get very close to a plant and cut. And like these knobs, if you want to remove knobs, they're great for removing knobs. And they're super strong, so they cut big stuff too. I would say that you could get by with one of these and not even have to worry about having a pair of Phelps hose, but they're just so fun to wear around, see? This is it's a little key saw, little bonsai, specially made for bonsai. And it's really great for getting in there in tight spots. And a couple of draws, it cuts going backwards, not forward. A couple of draws and it makes a nice clean cut. This I didn't know I'd use as much, and as you can see it's all bent up and it's got lots of sap on it, so it's been used quite a bit. These scissors is another thing we sell. They're good for working on foliage or even just small. I'm going to make a cut here. So if I wanted to make this cut, I want to make this cut this way. And what's going to happen is the bare part, which is sticking out right here, of course, is going to be on the bottom of the cut. So I'm going to come in, and I'm going to shorten this, if I don't cut the end of my finger off. So you can't see that, and these are really handy for that. So the other side of the cut is real obvious, so it's down. And I'm not going to say that it's bad to show bark or broken bark because it's actually tradition. But when you're doing these small prunings, it's nice to be able to get in there and not show that cut, hide it. This break is going to stay on this plant, at least for a while. It's probably going to be the new leader right there. And I'll explain that in a bit. So, keep moving. Let's see. So this is a root pick. Very handy. And you can get these like with a couple tines on. And for bigger trees, we have trees that are this big. So for bigger trees, we use the regular garden hose with the 3 prongs on them. And this is a really handy tool for cleaning out around, finding out where you are on the, you want to find your roots, you want to find the trunk, because we start out with something like this. Can't find anything. So, and this is a gift from Nan. Thank you. This is a pair of Milwaukee pruners. This is a real nice tool. It's very strong and very sharp. I have found it's nice because you can get into tight places with it. But I did this tree with it the other day, and when I was doing it, I was trying to put wire on, and I got back in there and I snipped, and one of the pieces of wire just fell out. And I didn't even know it. That's how sharp it is. It went right through the wire. So then I had to redo the branch. But nice, very nice tool. And where did this come from? No, it's Milwaukee.
Oh, Milwaukee.
Oh, here it is. Niwaki. AKA, so Simon Pierce had them. So very nice tool. So this is some real basics, and you can have a lot more. And they make They make tools for splitting trunks. They make tools for just cutting knobs. They make endless amounts of tools, and you know, whoever has the most tools wins. So I have 2 big belts full of them. Walk around with this. Nan would also reminded me that she and Tess set up this whole area for bonsai for me because I had them scattered all over the place, and they were like, "Oh, if that's what he wants to do, we're going to give him this whole spot." And so my tools are there. I don't have to go to the tool shed and get my tools. My tools are where the plants are, so that if I'm walking by and I go, "Oh yeah," then I can just grab something, clean it up a little bit, and move on. If I don't get stuck there for the next hour, because you just kind of get into it. Okay, next slide. Okay, these are some of the pots we use. So it's, let's see, it's pot, screen, and wire. So for growing, and this is becoming more and more popular as far as the science of growing. Plastic pots, as you all probably know, are not the best. They don't breathe. They get very hot, and they're usually black, so in the sun they just kind of cook the poor plant. So we've gotten away from plastic, not that we don't have it. We still have plenty of plastic pots, but we recycle, and people bring us old pots and we use them. But we have gone to these, and up to trees this big around, we're using this stuff. This, obviously they don't fit this little guy, but they make them bigger. So this breathes very well, and you can bury it in the ground, right up to here. And the tree will put roots out through it, but they will make this funny little, like a plug, and you can unplug the roots almost. And these will cut the roots off, and so you get about a 70% root mass inside this if you have it outside in the ground, and that's even with a tree like this. So as opposed to like tree spading a tree, and you've got 25% of the roots and a lot of soil, and most of the roots are still in the ground. So this is a very handy item. These are fabric pots. None of these made it in the picture. So this fabric pot was much taller. We cut it down. I use these for smaller plants, or if I want to start getting those roots to be a little less. So instead of a big deep root system, I'm trying to trim them and get them down. So we do a lot of this root trimming in the spring, and I would advise that most of it be done in the spring. They don't have to be dormant, but early, so they get a good chance to grow back, especially with roots. This pot, okay. This was from Pinewoods Nursery. Anybody remember Pinewoods? It was down by Woods Nursery in Sudbury or in Brandon. And he gave me a bunch of these when he closed, and they're for pond plants. And boy, these are like super aerated. So I guess I picked that one up already though. What else have we got here? This is not just for holding cookies. So this is a training pot, and these are handy when the plant's getting towards where you want to get it ready for one of these traditional pots. So it has more shape of the traditional pot, so roots are going to conform a little bit more. And they also come with a handy tray. Classic bonsai pots do not have trays. They're just all about draining that water out of there. These come with a little screen built right into the mold and some tiny little holes around the outside. So classic, this is just a commercially made pot. Should have a couple holes in it. It's the best because when you're going to tie your tree into the pot with wire, you make a U out of the wire and slide it up through here, and one piece here and one piece here. And then you can actually find a way to tie your tree down so it doesn't tip or fall out. This, obviously pre-made for wire. We didn't buy, they'll sell you all these little round things. This is a craft wire. I actually bought this at like Round Robin or something. And there was a whole bag of it. And they're great. It's just the right size. You can fit them into your pots. We use them in hanging baskets. We use them in all kinds of things. So a very handy product, and it lasts just about forever, but if you reuse it, here's another piece. Comes in all colors too. You just don't see them in the bottom of the pot. What else is here? Oh, the wire. So the wire, it comes in all different sizes now. Originally, people were using a lot of copper wire. I know Peter Chan, he was an electrical engineer as a young man, and he was bringing home big spools of wire from work. And what the industry's kind of settled on now is this anodized aluminum wire. It's very easy to bend. Not as strong as copper, so it doesn't do the, if you're bending a branch with it, it doesn't have as much strength, but you can double it. And it also comes in thicker than this, and it comes also down to quite thin. It's all in millimeters, so I'm not really sure. I think this is a 3. At any rate, this wire also, because it's got that black anodized on it, it's not as obvious. You can use pink though. It doesn't always look as good. I was wondering if there was any older. I have noticed that the anodized wears off. Yeah, there's one on here. This was on here last year, and it's starting to get a little bit silvery. But it works really well, and you can just say, oh, I don't like that today, so I'm going to put that down there. Move this over here. There. Certain plants won't allow you to do that. This one really doesn't mind. So, moving along. Let's see. Okay. Water, light, and fertilizer. Here's where we come into a problem with your classic pot. Classic pot's usually small, shallow, and doesn't hold a lot of water because drainage is super important. So you have to be really careful and not to let it ever get dry. And junipers, I can't tell you how many people have told me, oh, junipers, they can grow in the desert. Doesn't matter. They can dry out for weeks and they're fine. They're not. And these plants dry out to the point where there's no moisture in here. The roots will die, and it takes some months to actually, you're like, so we saved that one, and then about 3 months later it all turns brown. So we are very careful. Who's the most important person in the nursery? The watering person. Somebody told me on that, and I was like, yeah, that's true. So here, we use 2 different watering systems. This, coming from above, is a mist system. And it's piped all the way along the top. It's not very complicated, really easy to hook up. And coming off of the same pipes as the mist system, we then run a Toro irrigation hose up there, and we draw down on that with these little 1-inch spaghetti hoses. And we drive one on a spot spitter, which is super simple. Piece of plastic with a little notch in it. We stick them in the bottom of each pot. That way we can just turn that system on for 15 minutes on a hot day, and we know everything's safe. But we do tend to like to walk through and check, because what if the hose fell out? If it's down towards the ground, the rabbits love to chew these things up. But very handy system. So watering is going to be really important, especially if you're in this size pot, and let's say you've got you know, like that much plant on top, it's going to be drawn out of it quite a bit. And if you're using once you get to this size pot, you might be using more of a rocky or what they call akadama, which is a clay pebble. It's manufactured in Japan. That is going to drain much quicker. It's going to dry out much quicker. So you really got to stay on them for water, which is one of the reasons why we don't use akadama. We really, it's no matter who you look at some of these people who are out there who've been doing this for years, and they'll have a big pot of akadama and they'll be showing it to people, and then you go around and look at their plants, and there's plenty of compost in those plants because that's where the moisture is going to stay. And also they're getting some nourishment. So light, we use a shade cloth, 35 to 50% depending on what kind of plants they are. These little guys, junipers, everybody thinks they need to be in full sun. They're fine in some shade. They're very happy actually. They're greener and they grow better. Not like on the north side of the house, but 30 to 50 filtered sunlight per. We have a lot of vines growing in here, so they also shade these, just give it filtered sunlight. There's you can't really see it in here, but there's a Procumbens nana that's huge back in here. It's coming down out of the pot. Here's just that one spruce. So this is a fun area to go in, and when you turn that water on, the hummingbirds and the bees are just, they come alive in there. Because they just love it. The hummingbirds can sit on top of everything, go taking a bath, and there's water flying all over the place. And everybody knows the temperament of hummingbirds. You know, they'll fight you for it. So if they want in there, you better get out of the way. So I got to speed this up. Next one. See, we could have done this all day. Winter. So here's where we come into a real stickler. So winter up here, we're very cold. We're mostly zone 4 plants. So zone 4 plants, which all of these are, they require a dormancy period of 2 to 3 months at less than 40 degrees. So if we buy one of these in the store, in the pot, it's a juniper, a lot of them are, a lot of them are this, Procumbens nana. You put it on your shelf, and first of all, you have to make sure that you keep it watered because it comes in this, they do pack them in like rocky soil. You might want to just get it repotted, that's what you should do. And then in the wintertime, it's move it to a room that's not as heated. Indoor air is dry, and they're not, that's not natural for these plants. You know, outside here, humid. Even in the wintertime, winter air is much drier, and that is what dries our plants out, which is why we mulch them in well. These are some of the guys we can't fight them, so rabbits and meadow voles have done what they have killed. With 1 year, we lost like 100 of these to meadow voles. So then we decided, okay, we're going to build some cages. So built these cages. We put them in here after it freezes, starting to freeze. And let them get a good taste of cold weather. And then we put them in, we layer them with mulch, and we soak it. Now, let's say if you had 2 plants and you didn't want to try to overwinter them in your basement or your garage or in another room, and again, I'm talking cold, very cold hardy plants, you can do this in your yard and just get a little cage, build a little cage, put a top on it, and you're all set, you know, and you don't have to water it. You don't have to do anything. It's all taken care of. And this little note on the bottom is 50%. Okay, so some bonsai nurseries in our literature that we get, that's our literature that we get, professional literature, some of these guys are supposed to make 50% just taking care of their customers' plants in the winter. So, and what they do is they take the plant and a lot of them will have, over in Shoreham, there's a place where they store apples. And that isn't like putting something in your refrigerator, it doesn't dehydrate it. So they keep the humidity just right, temperature just right, and those plants are very happy in there. They don't really need a lot of light. And then, again, that's for hardy plants. Some people are using house plants, or I saw an azalea running down here. Somebody showed me their azalea, which is very nice, and she's had flowers already. Those are not so, they don't need as much of a dormancy period because they'll survive quite far south. So depending on the region that the plant's from, you put it in a cool room or set it in a window where it gets a lot of cold. But definitely want to stay on these kind of things as far as getting them out. You can always take them out and look at them, well, unless they're frozen in. So I got to make this really quick. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go over a couple of varieties. One thing is a lot of junipers, or any bonsai, is this is trident maple, zone 5. We don't grow them. You see this V shape, inverted V shape. You'll see it repeated again and again and again on. And that is a tradition. And we're not 100% traditionalists, but that is something that it does have a beauty that goes with the plant. And so that's what you're shooting for. And what you're really shooting for is going back to the Panjing, is you're trying to find a way to make this plant look like a full-grown tree out of nature. And so this plant has beautiful nabari. Looks like a clock holding right onto the ground there. That's the exposed roots with nabari. Nice hefty trunk. Was cut back here heavily at one point, and a leader was taken to create the new one. Not a lot of movement in this, it's formal upright, but instead this tree would be way tall. They were trying to keep the top down and give this some girth. Same with these branches, they've been pruned in and in and in. This fellow here is a Japanese black pine. Again, not quite very hardy here. This is an enormous plant, probably 4 feet tall. It's got a wire coming down, tied to the bottom of the pot so it doesn't just fall out. These are from a show. These pads is what they're called on pines. They're very nice. The needles on this pine conform very well to that. They don't usually get a very nice nabari in pines. Just don't have a dense, heavy root system like that. But it's a beautiful tree and it's quite old. It's also been cut back over the years to create new leaders. Push the button. Around here. Okay. This is one I'd love to do, and I'm going to try to do some this year. This is a forest. These are Chinese elm. I won't be using Chinese elm, but I'm going to use some natives for this project. Each one of these trees is a single put into this tray and built up around. And that's called a forest. If you actually took one tree and trimmed one side and then scratched down the bark, lay the tree down on its side and put some rooting hormone here, and then you take each branch and you bring them up, and then each branch is your separate tree. And that's called a raft. I've seen that done before very successfully with plants that will root with a little air layer. Juniper's a little air layer. This is a cascade. I didn't bring a cascade pot. That's not a traditional cascade pot. A traditional cascade pot is tall, so that when you have your plant showing, let's say here, it has lots of room to come down. And the way we grow our cascades is we put them in a hanging basket, hang them up in the shade house, and they grow down over the side. Then we can start pruning them later. So push the button again. Aha. Okay. This is called the tanuki, on the end and on the end. So the tanuki is a relative of dogs and foxes in Japan, and I think it's Japan. I'm not even going to fuss with that. So It resembles a raccoon. In fact, they look just like a raccoon. And they're known as a trickster. And I think taverns in Japan have them outside, a little statue of one. So this is an old print of one. What it is, you take a piece of driftwood and you add it to a nice long juniper or maple or whatever you happen to have. This happens to be a juniper. And when you carve into this wood, when you carve into the root or into this, you can slip this in it. You go around, and some people use a little nail, tack them right in there. And you wrap it around, and eventually you get something like this, and it makes a tree with a tiny little trunk look like it's ancient. Some of them don't bleach so much to make it so different, but this artist wanted that look. So this plant right here is a San Jose juniper, also a ground cover juniper, so this is the way they grow. They come up a little bit and then they just go. And what we did was this spring we had a bunch of these, and we let one run out. Right, we had everything else cut off, and then we dug them up and we planted them like this. This plant is always going to want to grow like this. So therefore, half of our work is done for us, because now it's a tree and it's going to start growing out like this. So, yeah, I'm really excited to see what those are going to do. Let's move on here. I told you we could be here all day. So this is it's just a list of what we like to use. I'm not really going to go through it because we don't really have any time for questions if I do. You can come down to the nursery. I'd be glad to talk to you about any of that. Okay, so here is this guy, right here. And put it all back in shape because we put it in a box to bring it here. It got all squished. So it started out looking something like this one. So this is when we start. Often what we'll do is we'll cut this top right here so that we don't have to take the whole plant out, and start working, see where we are, and get those teasers out, and you start cleaning some roots away. And what you'll be able to find then is what you've got in there for a trunk. Do you have a nice heavy trunk? If you're in a nursery, you just kind of walk around and do this. You're looking for a plant. They think you're weird, but it's just like, oh, no, why should I buy this? Now we're getting all of our plants, obviously, wholesale, large lots, so we get what we get. But then I go to a friend of mine's nursery and I pick through his, pick things out, and he's like, oh, gee, I heard. So this is what it looks like. To begin with, we cut this off a little bit. We start cleaning down the roots, start getting an actual crown, because in nature, trees, shrubs, anything is crowned. Settle it for an actual crown, and start to look for what we have for a trunk. Well, I didn't know it was in there, and look at what we found. So that shows that tree is going to be an informal upright. So, like that pine was. So what we do is we start pruning from the bottom up, clean a little bit more out. We want to see some of this, and then we also start wiring as we go. Now, you don't have to wire every plant. This one is very handy to wire. And then you see these big gaps in here. So what we end up doing, and you can't see it here, is we trimmed a lot of this out and then wired somebody and moved it around, plotted it around to fill in that spot. So, and then we just keep working our way up, and then we look for the top. Where is the top of this tree going to be? Well, these, we stake them, right? Otherwise this would be flat to the ground. I mean, flat. So we stake these to get them up, get some vertical growth on them. And this one, this is where the stake stopped, so it just tried to go back to where it belonged. And so I tried to bend it. I thought, wow, maybe I can get a little bend right there, and it snapped right off. So that didn't matter because that's acceptable, accurate both. I just cleaned it up a little bit, and this will be the new leader right here. And it's actually a pretty nice looking tree already. So
You don't have to put anything on the top of the,
You mean like paint it?
yeah.
Well, so I've been in the nursery business my whole life. We've gone back and forth about that. The old black stuff we used to paint on, not very good. It suffocates the tree, causes fungal infections inside. It just doesn't get any air and doesn't heal. There are some pastes that you can get. There's also just plain old good old latex house paint. It breathes. Put a little latex house paint on here and you get air movement, and that way your bark won't rot back. However, these have their own natural resin, so I don't worry about that. But if you're working on a maple or something, yeah. So anyhow, that's how that tree turned out, just with a couple hours of fussing around with it, and then I put it in one of these pots to try to get some of the roots back that I cleaned off, and we just did this. So, but I think it's going to be a very nice little plant. And another one of these guys over here. Okay, this is Shimpaku. That's Procumbens nana. Shimpaku, I can do this. No stickies. So, very nice. This is one that we have been growing for quite a few years, and it was a tiny little thing. We've got hundreds of them. And this one I decided from the beginning we were not going to wire it. Let's see what we can do without wires. And I was talking to somebody in here earlier, and I said, every time I walk by it, I just want to, just a little bit, but I'm not going to. Because it's really, it's really a nice plant. It hasn't been pruned on the top yet this year, but it's coming out to be quite a nice plant. If I bent that down a little more, I'd get more of that V, but you know what? We're going to leave it that way. It gets its moss growing in it, and it's quite nice. And it won't. This one won't be transplanted this year, maybe next year. Clay is nice because it breathes, so we use the clay. A glazed clay obviously won't breathe as well. We even have a little decoration in this one. I love this one. So this was given to me by a nurseryman. I had his nursery last year, and he had a bunch of taxus. So these are your yews, dense spreading yews. They're outside. He had a whole pile of them. And he had them out in the bright sunlight in the middle of the nursery, and it was 120 degrees on that black fabric. And he just said, I can't grow these, aren't I? And I said, well, I take a few and play with them. He said, take them. So this one is kind of a cool little tree all by itself. So the top is all burned off by the sun, so that's all dead wood in there. This guy is another Shimpaku. Very bendable, very easy to work with wire. If I were really super serious about this, I'd probably get poo-pooed for leaving this on. This would probably have been removed, bring everything down, try to use this big, then this trunk would look much bigger in proportion. But I'm in my late 60s and I'm waiting around. And it looks nice. It's a nice looking plant. So eventually this may come off, but it will come off as an air layer, and then you'll have a different plant. As Peter Chan said, constantly evolving. So how much time do we have left? Not much. Geez, I'm really sorry. So this is just this artist was trying to capture these antique pots. Beautiful pot. The only thing I would say about this one, you don't get these kind of things out of these production pots. These are, if you're going to just grow a couple bonsai, go out and find a potter and pick a really nice pot. This plant will grow into the side here. I had experience with this 5 years later. How do we get that out of there? It's jammed right in there, and you're in there going like this. And so some potters will make them where that's decorative on the outside and it's straight. If not, you can actually modify it yourself. And this is the last one. I love this pot. So this is a tray for a forest. This, again, you can feel that it's handmade. And it's just absolutely a beautiful tray, and any forest would look nice in it. So this is kind of like where you want to be, but starting is fine too. And putting a rock by them or something. See, this rock is, I mean, sometimes, you know, at a show, all you see is this, right there. Because this rock has a lot of beauty to it. And this little guy would be you're going to get another talk, so I'm not even going to get into it, but there are two other styles of plants that go along with bonsai plants, and I hear someone's coming in June, I'm going to be here. I'll be in the audience going, hey, what about me? But, I mean, just the simple beauty of these things is what you're after. We've included them in the business just because I couldn't stop growing them, so there's not doing all these things. But, and you know, this broken piece right here, you leave them. They actually make a pair of pliers to roll this back. Strip it down a little bit more and make it look like a natural break. So, and they'll style, instead of taking all the branches off, this one wasn't thick enough. If you had some thick branches coming out here, they'll skin them all down. Make it look like a natural break, because then again, it looks more like a tree you saw out in the forest. So I'm sorry it ran so long, so is there any questions?
It used to be on top of the dirt like there. It wasn't a picture.
You know, so what you're doing is you're making a crown, and early on they would probably had soil up much higher. So you keep cleaning that crown down.
So you look for a root pattern that goes like this?
And then you start cleaning it.
And then you'll lower those dirt then?
Then lower the soil a little bit, let those be exposed a little more, and over time, this particular one over here has quite nice nabari. They're young yet, but they're all covered with moss, and I can't figure out whether I want to see them or I want to see the moss.
Yeah, you mentioned transplanting that, and what would be your goal?
In moving that plant. So you don't transplant these plants. If I had a plant in here for like 3, 5, 6 years, a pretty small pot, it's going to get root bound. There won't be any new root growth. There's no root growth, you get no growth on top. Then the plant will perish. So that's why these plants are periodically, and you know, depending on the plant, a few years, you take it out of the pot, and you clean off the roots, and you trim some away, and then you clean the top down just a little bit, and you can put it back in the same pot. But what you've done is you've removed some roots so that there's some more vigor now in the plant, and it will begin to grow a little bit more. And the other key to some of these, you know, if there was a big heavy tree in here, maybe you don't want it to grow that fast. So they might leave them in there a little bit longer, but they're not going to leave them in there long enough to hurt the plant. That's the other thing about the organics might vanish from the soil when you really got your plant where you want it, because you may want to just control the fertilizer yourself. You may not want a bunch of organic fertilizer in there, but honestly, it's really good for the trees. We also use a slow release 3-month pelleted fertilizer, and you can get that in organic. I think like the big shot companies make them now. So everything's out there. And books, there are a million books out there. We're big on books. But, I was supposed to be reading from this. Do you want to start over? And you know, magazines and people's ideas. Oh, go ahead.
How old is that plant behind you?
That?
100 years?
I'll let you in on a secret. That's a piece of art. This is a real pot. This is an artist who wanted to show off these pots. So he created the plants to go in them because he was in love with the pots. But if that tree was a real tree, I'd say it would probably be, it's Japanese pine. It'd easily be 100 years old. And these trees in the beginning that you saw, that great big Japanese pine, that thing, that's probably 400 or 500 years old. And yep.
And so a tree 400 or 500 years old is removed from its pot periodically?
Oh yeah.
To trim the roots,
Yep.
and then it's replaced in the pot.
It doesn't have to go in the same pot.
Yeah.
Sometimes if they say, well, you know, I want it to grow a little more, maybe I'll put it in a bigger pot. And these pots can get pretty big. And they're different styles in different parts of the world. I think Thailand is very popular to have very large bonsai trees. We use white oak, and got some pretty nice plants going. Starting with a trunk like this, and then you just cut off the tree, and you get this nice growth starts, and then you work your way through. So I've got some pretty exciting big stock coming on. It'll take a few more years before they're really great.
How old is this little guy here?
That one? Probably 6. But it hasn't been worked for 6 years. It's been grown for
Yeah.
like 4. You know.
And the stump is going to be hidden at some point with the new leader.
This, yep. Yeah, we don't worry about that. The new leader, more branches will come. That's the other thing about like juniper. Juniper and spruce, when you cut them back, they put out new growth. Pine, cut them back, you better, you can't just cut a stub on a pine and expect something to grow out of it. Yes.
Montreal used to have a beautiful bonsai garden. I haven't been up there in 20 years. Do they still have it?
That I don't know, but they probably do. I'm not an expert, by the way. I'm supposed to say that at first. I'm far from an expert. Honestly, I've been interested in this forever, but I really only started 8-10 years ago. And I will say that you can gather a lot of information from books, but talking to other people, I ran into this guy. I went down to visit a man in Florida, and he was just so happy. And I went in there, and he had a pair of, he's younger than me, had a long pair of tweezers, and he was weeding his trees. And he was just kind of sitting down on a bench. Put one down. And he just said, so he mentioned to me, he said, hey, you know Peter Chan? I said, well, I don't know him, but I've seen him. And he said, he's like 80 years old. He said, that man's going to live forever because he's always happy. And it's the work. I mean, you can just get really giddy about this stuff.
Planning to live all forever. I wanted to start one here in Vermont.
Right.
What would be like, would be a juniper?
What would I choose if I was going to grow one here in Vermont? Probably, it depends on how patient you want to be and how long you want to be. If you want to start off with something like this, there you are. These guys are easy to use. They don't grow terribly fast, but they grow fast enough where you have to look after them. Shimpaku, this little Shimpaku right here, I just noticed, this is just one of our seedlings. It's looking pretty good by itself right there. This would be a broom style top. Shimpaku are just a great, very rewarding plant. You look at that bend, you can just whip it right over and you can twist them, and if it breaks, so what? It broke in nature. Yeah. Anybody else? Yes.
When is your hands-on workshop ending?
Well, I don't know. Soon. It really depends on weather, because things are just not normal out there.
But the garden club is going to Miller Hill Farm on June 25th. That's just for the garden club.
Great. Hi.
How do you increase the girth?
All right. Yeah. So that's a whole science in itself. Basically, just keep removing top, but the way I've done it is, and that's another way to do it, is you grow it out in the nursery. Out in the ground, they're going to put a real size on. In Japan, there's nurseries that's just around the villages, up in the mountains, that are just full of little trees that are all pruned perfectly. And you grow them in the ground to gain a lot of girth, then you start root pruning them a bit and get them out. So I've got some, I didn't take pictures, but I got some back in the nursery I'm pretty excited about that actually are maples that have this, that come down and they're already spreading out literally this wide, and they're only this tall now because we cut them off. Anybody else? Yes?
Are you pruning the roots as much as you're pruning the top?
No, the roots we do once a year at the most. You can feel this pot, this plant's got plenty of room in here. This one also, you can feel it. But as we're moving them from pot to pot, we are teasing them out. Probably these guys every 2 years, it's really not necessary, but we probably do that anyhow. Because we're trying to get them out of the plastic too and into these fabric pots. They just grow so much better. Anybody else? Yes?
A maple tree, when cut like that, has very small leaves.
Right.
Is that natural to the tree, that the leaves are not normal maple size, but they're very small?
Well, you can control leaf size. There's a couple different ways. You can control leaf size by your root size. So if you keep your root mass small, then like a red maple doesn't put on full-size red maple leaves. Throw a bunch of compost in there and stuff and it will, though. And the other thing, before a show, people strip them all off. It's like, oh, 2 weeks to the show, let's get rid of these leaves. And then you get all these nice small leaves. Anything else? Yes?
Putting the top and the roots at the same time, is that an issue?
Yes, that's absolutely fine. So when we transplant, we do both. We might, though, carry on pruning the top throughout the season, because you're walking by and you just want, oh yeah, that was growing in a little bit, and I want this one over here. So you fuss with them, and that's just part of the ongoing work of art. Okay? Anybody else? Thank you very much.